On April 4, 1968, the world held its breath. A single gunshot cracked the evening air in Memphis, Tennessee, and in that instant, one of the most powerful voices of peace and justice was silenced. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the preacher who dared to dream of equality, fell to the floor of the Lorraine Motel's second-story balcony. But what really happened that day? Who pulled the trigger, and why? And most disturbingly, was it just one man, or was the rabbit hole far deeper? Because what if we told you that not everything about Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination adds up? What if the story we've all been told, the lone gunman, the simple escape, the neat capture, wasn't the full truth? What if something darker was at play, something buried, something deliberately erased from history books? Before that bullet was fired, King had been making enemies in high places. Not just racists. Not just Southern segregationists. But men in suits, sitting in cold government offices, who saw him not as a hero, but as a threat. And maybe, just maybe, they had reasons to want him gone. So stay with us, don't blink, don't pause, because by the end of this video, you might just see one of the most tragic moments in American history in an entirely different light. Like this video, subscribe to our channel and tap that notification icon. Dr. King's journey toward his final day was anything but smooth. Born in Atlanta in 1929, he was raised under the shadow of Jim Crow laws. But from his earliest years, there was a fire in him. He would grow into a man whose words could shake cities, whose marches could freeze economies, and whose nonviolence could break an empire built on hate. By 1963, he had already etched his name into history with the "I Have a Dream" speech. But King wasn't just dreaming, he was doing. He was organizing, building coalitions, and forcing America to confront its darkest demons. And the more he pushed, the more he became a target. By the time he led the Selma marches in 1965, he wasn't just being watched, he was being hunted. The FBI had tapped his phones, bugged his hotel rooms, smeared his name in secret memos. Under J. Edgar Hoover's leadership, the Bureau considered King a danger to national security. Why? Because King had started to evolve. No longer was he just talking about civil rights. He began questioning capitalism. He criticized the Vietnam War. He started demanding economic justice. To the establishment, that was crossing the line. He dared to ask, what good is the right to sit at a lunch counter if you can't afford a sandwich? What's freedom worth if it still comes with poverty? And so, in 1968, he launched the Poor People's Campaign. Black, white, Latino, Native, he called them all together. It was no longer just about race. It was about class, power, and the redistribution of wealth. And just like that, King became far more dangerous. On April 3rd, the night before his death, he stood in Memphis, rain pounding outside, and delivered what would become his final prophecy. The speech was called, "I've Been to the Mountaintop." And in it, King said this, "I may not get there with you, but we, as a people, will get to the promised land." He spoke as if he knew the end was near. He even mentioned the threats against his life. But what no one knew was that the very next day, that threat would become real. April 4th. It was just after 6 p.m. King stood on the balcony of room 306 at the Lorraine Motel, talking with friends and aides. Below, Jesse Jackson waited. A shot rang out. Chaos erupted. King's body dropped, a pool of blood forming near his jaw. Within an hour, Dr. King was pronounced dead. The nation mourned. Cities burned. Riots exploded across over 100 towns. America fractured, again. But as the shock settled, the hunt for the killer began. Or, did it? Enter James Earl Ray. A small-time criminal. A drifter. A man with a long rap sheet, but no history of political violence. According to the official story, he shot King from the bathroom window of a nearby boarding house with a rifle, fled the scene, escaped the country, and was later caught in London 2 months later. Case closed. Or so they said. But here's where things get murky. James Earl Ray never stood trial. He pleaded guilty under pressure but recanted 3 days later. For the rest of his life, he insisted he was innocent. He claimed he was set up, used as a patsy by someone he called Raoul, a mysterious handler who gave him money, instructions, and ultimately abandoned him. Sounds like a conspiracy theory, right? But then something strange happened. The King family believed him. That's right, Coretta Scott King and her children publicly declared they did not believe Ray was the killer. They even sued for a civil trial in 1999. The jury found that there was a conspiracy and that government agencies were likely involved in King's death. Yes. A U.S. court ruled that there was evidence of a wider conspiracy. So why didn't that make headlines? Why was the world told the case was closed? According to the evidence revealed during that trial, multiple agencies may have had knowledge of the plot. There were suspicious FBI informants, Memphis police officers pulled off duty that day, and military intelligence units shadowing King's movements, who then vanished just before the shot was fired. Why would military intelligence be monitoring a non-violent civil rights leader? Because by 1968, King's dream was no longer poetic, it was revolutionary. He threatened the military-industrial complex by opposing the war. He threatened Wall Street by demanding a basic income. He threatened both Republicans and Democrats by uniting the poor across racial lines. Dr. King was not just talking about voting rights. He was talking about transforming America's entire structure. Peacefully, yes, but radically. And that's when peaceful revolution becomes unacceptable to the powers that be. As shocking as this sounds, even former FBI agents have admitted the Bureau wanted to neutralize King. Declassified memos from Hoover's office called him the most dangerous Negro leader in the country. Let that sink in. A man preaching nonviolence was seen as more dangerous than men with guns. Because King had something no weapon could deliver, the moral high ground. And he was starting to win. He made racism look ugly on national TV. He made hypocrisy scream. And if his Poor People's Campaign succeeded, if thousands had marched on Washington and camped until demands were met, America might have been forced to change. So now ask yourself, was it really just James Earl Ray? Even members of Congress have called for new investigations. But none have gone anywhere. Maybe because the truth is too heavy. Maybe because admitting it would unravel the myth of American democracy. Maybe because if we learn King was silenced not just by hate, but by the very system he tried to change, then we'd have to ask who else they're willing to silence. This isn't just history. It's a mirror. Because even now, voices rise and fall. Activists get discredited. Movements get infiltrated. Surveillance continues. The tools have changed, but the tactics remain. And perhaps that's the real tragedy. Not just that King was killed, but that his dream still terrifies power. That we still debate how much justice is too much. That 50 years later, we're still asking, was it just a lone gunman, or was it something bigger? We may never know the full truth. But what we do know is this: Dr. King didn't die because he was a dreamer. He died because he tried to make the dream real. Because he believed peace should not mean poverty. Because he believed that black, white, and brown had a right to dignity, together. And because he looked power in the eye and said, "We are coming to get our check." That's the part they don't quote in the textbooks. But you won't forget it. Not now. So if you made it this far, you know this story isn't over. Hit that like button if you believe truth deserves more than a footnote. Subscribe for the next chapter, we're just getting started. And drop a comment, do you believe the official story? Or, do you feel like something's missing? Because maybe, just maybe, the real story of Dr. King's death hasn't even been written yet.